Welcome to the Unit Economics Podcast. I'm Josh Stabinsky. On today's episode, I sit down with Sahand Dilmaghani, founder and CEO of Terra Kaffe, a company building bean-to-cup espresso machines for people who want better coffee at home without having to rely on pods or manual barista equipment. Sahand started his career in finance before joining an electric vehicle company based in Germany, where he got an early education in hardware manufacturing, supply chain, and bringing a complex physical product to market. That experience proved foundational when he set out to build Terra Kaffe. And in the years since launching, the company's lineup has expanded to include multiple machines, add-ons like a milk frother, and a growing set of products around the daily coffee routine. In this conversation, we talk about the economics of building a hardware business, from working with contract manufacturers to learning from customer feedback, using machine data and firmware updates to improve the product itself after it ships, and deciding when to expand from one premium machine into a broader product lineup. We also get into rental and subscription models, B2B demand, and the trade-offs when building a product that has to be both technically complex and easy to use every morning. This was without a doubt one of my favorite conversations to date, and I think that's pretty fitting considering this is the 50th episode of Unit Economics. It feels a little surreal. I think it can be really easy to get wrapped up in the day-to-day when working on a project like this, and so I think it's important to recognize these milestones as they come. Regardless of whether or not this is your first episode or you've been following along since the beginning, I sincerely appreciate you listening. With that, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Sahand, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. If you wouldn't mind just starting with a brief background on yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm Sahand Dilmaghani. I'm the founder and CEO of Terra Kaffe. I started this company about 7.5 years ago. Before starting Terra Kaffe, I was working at an electric vehicle company in Germany. And I actually came at that business with a finance background. So I started my career in investment banking, doing kind of, typical M&A and private placement work for tech-enabled businesses. So naturally, when I joined that company, I was joining them in kind of like a traditional finance capacity, FP&A, FinOps, corporate finance, you name it. But I was also, at that time, we were 7 employees. I was the only person in the company that spoke Chinese fluently. So I just got a lot of exposure to manufacturing, production, supply chain, you name it. And it was a great just learning ground, fertile soil for me to understand intimately what it takes to bring a complex product from ideation to mass production. So that's kind of the academic background, and then less from a formal sense or less academic or professional, but just from my upbringing, both my parents are architects. So I was much more surrounded by like sculpting and architecture books growing up. So there was always this fascination and love of design. And all of that's kind of just enveloped with a love of coffee, and saw an opportunity to build something special in the category where people are, using espresso machines, coffee machines every morning, and felt like there was a really interesting chance to build something that got people off of pod-based machines like an espresso and Keurig.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about the particular gap in the market that you saw.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it really started as a personal buying journey. Like our family, we had every gadget under the sun, but I was shopping for a new espresso machine, and that's where I became intimately aware of a broader issue for pretty much all coffee lovers that were just pushed to 2 options. You had the default incumbent pod-based machines like Keurig and Nespresso deliver super stale, weak coffee, but it's all in the name of convenience. You push a button, get a coffee, kind of move on with your day. It's very utilitarian. The other side was much more mystical. You kind of had these bean-to-cup machines, but that some of them were very manual. It's almost like it required like an undergraduate degree in being a barista. And then you had a few machines, actually not a lot, that were automatic bean-to-cup machines and delivered this kind of false promise of bringing the cafe home, but they were really overpriced. It was like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 even. They were poorly designed. It was like Sega Genesis era designs without any of the vintage charm, And I looked at that category and I was like, they're dated. They're not good quality coffee. They're not easy to use. And we know that people are getting more and more accustomed to quality craft coffee. They're drinking more espresso-based beverages than ever before. Latte surpassed drip coffee in 2017 as the most ordered drink out of home. And people were basically stuck in this world of, do I go for the poor quality, low quality pod machines? Do I take a chance on these complicated bean to cup machines that or really an eyesore on my countertop. And and just saw an opportunity to say, look, like in a world of BlackBerry, why is there no Apple in this space?
Yeah, makes complete sense. I am particularly intrigued by the fact that it doesn't seem like you have a background in hardware development, though. So, where did you turn first when you decided it's time to launch the brand?
I made a very intentional decision with the startup I joined in Germany to basically use it as a blueprint. I had always been doing entrepreneurial things, never a venture backed business, but I'd always kind of dabbled. I knew going there that I was actually going to see, I mean, presumably if we were successful, I would see what it takes to scale a company from just like an initial MVP into a much bigger organization. And so I joined them and I didn't have any background in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. But what I loved is once you start building product, especially when you start building physical product, you start to realize it's just adult Legos. Like it's just bigger, more sophisticated adult Legos. Like if you, especially if you like math and stuff and just building things, whether it's like sub assemblies, tolerance stack ups, mold flow, now like these are just blocks of things coming together to ultimately serve a given purpose of what the product is supposed to do, how it's supposed to function. And it doesn't mean it's easy. It's super hard, but the complexity, the challenge is not necessarily always in understanding how the mechanics come together, whether you emphasize component selection or a certain element of design to be distinctive and stand out in somebody's home. It's all those like little millimeter tweaks and decisions and supply chain considerations and how that all comes together to actually build the final product. And when I thought about it, I started kind of like adding up all the hands and, eyes, whatever minds that had been on our product or had a hands-on product to get our TKO2 espresso machine out the door. And I started to realize, I was like, this isn't even in the dozens. This is like in the hundreds, touching on thousands of people that have been involved in the process of building this machine. So it's not easy, but it's super fun.
Talk to me a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about the TKO1 and what you
Yeah.
went to market with initially.
Yeah. So I kind of knew at the beginning I wasn't going to be able to raise any money for a consumer hardware business at the start. Like it was already on the other side of like Casper's economics getting published and everyone kind of, at least at the start, turning away from funding D2C businesses, especially in the kind of like larger scale consumer hardware space. And I basically bootstrapped the business for the first 1.5, 2 years. And I definitely used my familiarity with contract manufacturing, my fluency in Chinese to my advantage because I did a sourcing project. We met with a dozen various manufacturers that are active in this space. And, candidly, one of the biggest challenges in those days, the optionality was super limited. Coffee as a category had been predominantly controlled by Nespresso and Keurig. So there just wasn't that complex and diverse of a supply chain for people that knew how to handle and build strong quality control around super automatic bean to cup machines. So there weren't that many I could turn to, but there were some base models. And the way we got it out the door was it was basically getting our hands on as many prototypes of base models as possible and doing an iterative process, almost think of it more like a software sprint than like a hardware development process. We were changing sub-assemblies, component selections, then going on to the design side. Okay, we're bootstrapped. We don't have a lot of money to be able to redo the entire molds of the machine, but let's focus on the facade. Let's focus on the brew methodology. And really in an iterative basis, ship that machine to customers and change it based off of their feedback. Like a lot of people didn't know this, but the TKO1 changed probably 8 to 9 times over the 3.5 year cycle that we had that product in market based off of customer feedback.
What was the biggest selling point with the TKO2 then? When did you realize it was time to introduce a newer, more sophisticated model? And like what specifically was lacking in the TKO1 that told you it was time to launch this newer model?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we knew it was an MVP too. Like we knew we built it off a base model. We knew we iterated off of that base. But there were so many things that were foundationally off from what we wanted to accommodate in terms of like an ideal user experience. So it would have already required us to redo the entire chassis and basically skeleton of the machine. And in which case, we're already talking about building a new machine, like a small detail, but still a meaningful one in the day-to-day use. We would sell this TKO1 and it had 2 side doors that you had to constantly access for daily use, whether it's emptying the waste bin, refilling the water tank, what have you. We would have customers with the biggest kitchens, expansive kitchens, and they would still shove this machine up against a sidewall because it was like their coffee nook or their coffee corner. It was so frustrating for them to have to constantly access. You would need like 7 inches of clearance from each side of the machine. So to access each side of it. So we're like, okay, we know we need to redesign this to be front loading. We know we need to redesign this. Basically, everything you need to interface with is going to be on the front of the machine. We knew that there was precision around the coffee dosing and quality that we wanted to change. So going from a 3-step camshaft motor to a 64 two-stepper motor, because what it did was it actually allowed us to change the firmware where instead of just having 3 states of the brew unit, which is kind of like the heart of the machine, we could actually control how much that brew basket closes. And I don't know how much your listeners know about like the nuances of coffee brewing methodology, but like if you want to do a drip coffee versus an espresso, you don't want to necessarily tamp the grounds. You want to run a bloom process. You want to slowly drip the water through it. And then you can start to kind of increase the flow rate. And one of the biggest challenges with the TKO1 was it was only espresso-based beverages. And we kept talking with our customers. And one of the most valuable things I would say to anybody starting anything is just like constantly, especially in the early days, just keep talking to people that you don't know that are buying your product because you just learned so much. But it was so evident. It was like a two-partner decision, like whether it was, you and your wife or like you and your partner, like you knew that both of them needed to have buy-in. And one of them might love cortados and flat whites, but the other person's like, I just want a simple drip coffee. And we're like, okay, let's try, if this is supposed to be a super automatic machine, let's try and make this as all in one as possible. So let's change the brew methodology so that it can also accommodate everybody in the household or everybody in the office. So there were so many changes across the hardware, the software, the firmware of the machine that we wanted to change, but we really wanted to have a critical mass of customers before we started investing meaningful dollars in the O2.
I think the idea of gathering feedback for a product like this is particularly interesting. What did you start to learn as soon as your customers plugged in their machines and you were starting to collect actual usage data? What were some of the biggest surprises around the quantitative data maybe that you were collecting, right? It's one thing to talk to customers and to hear feedback around, oh, it's a pain to have to keep this 6 to 7 inches away from, the wall.
Yeah.
I need all this clearance, but it's another to actually, I guess I bring it up because people often don't know exactly how they use products. Like we have an idea around how
Yeah.
we use products, but there's some hidden truths to the way in which we use products. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you use some of the data you were collecting and if there are any surprises that you found in the user data.
Yeah, just for the record, we've collected 500 million data points from our machines in field. There's a 99% provision rate. So we made it so like if you don't want to connect your machine, you don't have to. Like the worst thing in the world would be like if your machine needs to be connected to the internet to work and God forbid the Wi-Fi goes out or even somebody just changed the Wi-Fi password and you can't brew a cup of coffee. Like I can only imagine the vitriol we would get at like 7 a.m. from customers being like, I'm going to kill you. But we made sure it could function without, but we still have 99% of people connect their machine to the cloud. So we do have a lot of that information. And with that, the idea was not let's collect data just for the sake of collecting it, just to say, oh, look how much we know. Let's translate this to actionable changes and enhancements to the product. So we've launched over, 20 firmware updates on people's machines in field. And the idea here was that it's there's a lot of like planned obsolescence baked into products. Like I want this to get better over time. There's so many ways to parse the information. Like even just seeing the brew methodology, like what are people brewing? How often are they tweaking it when they get a bag from us? Like, are they changing the recipe? Because we have a way where you can upload a roasting profile. So like if you buy a coffee bag from our marketplace, there's a QR code that the roaster themselves have set for that blend to be optimized, to be dialed in on our machine. Whether or not you upload that, use it, or you want to change it, whether or not you want to like have like custom modifications, for the screen, like there was all of these ways to parse the information. And then of course we still take people's input to heart and saying like, hey, like when we launched, you had multiple espresso profiles because you could be presumably using a lot of different bean types, but you couldn't customize it for each drink. So we said, they were like, okay, we want to be able to like have a custom, espresso profile for the cappuccino that's different from the latte, that's different from the cortado. So we had to build that out. People were like, you have this wake and brew function so that it runs a brew on the machine right from the wake up function. So people can basically use it like their alarm. And then they started telling us that they wanted, to have it different by day. So weekdays are different from weekends or something like that. So we built in all these different functions so they could just have it. More often than not, the things that we learned that people aren't just saying is we can tell from the cleaning functionality, what they're doing in the maintenance. We're like, we need to make this easier because they're getting a paper cut and they're getting frustrated. And that same alert can then trigger to a customer ticket. And you're like, oh, this is really annoying people. But they're not coming to us actively saying, hey, can you make a firmware update? Like our customers don't necessarily think that way. They're just like, I'm frustrated. And you're like, okay, but we can fix that. And that has been one of the most meaningful areas to improve the overall user experiences. Like identify all the little paper cuts that are oftentimes tied more so to maintenance than it is to the brewing that we can improve.
Interesting. How much of your engineering capacity is dedicated to ongoing sort of maintenance, iterative fixes to the existing product versus building new products?
It's probably like 50-50, but I think that's just a function of the life cycle of where we're at because we've launched so much newness. Like the last, 2 years, we've launched three meaningful hero products. And there's been so many things that we've gotten out the door that we're really proud of. But like, I think there's, strong opinions held lightly. Like we need to be listening to people and if they want to see stuff change. And it's not always like bug fixes, it's like the way I saw it was this. We're going to stand out with a distinctive design language, whether that's the industrial design, the UI design, or all of the above. But the way that we're going to win in the long run is we need to have a really, really good user experience and we need to have differentiated software. And the average user is not going to think of it as, oh, they have really great software. They're going to be like, this is a delight to use every morning. Like I want our machine to have the same like warmth and excitement that you have in your bed in the morning when you're just like perfectly cozy. I want it to feel that warm and just, yeah, like just inviting. So, yeah, but like 50-50.
So we've talked a little bit about the TK02. Tell me a little bit about the other two hero products that you introduced.
Yeah, I mean, the Demi machine was launched recently when we just started shipping about 5.5 months ago. The idea there was we're obviously very aware of the market positioning and how much the average American is spending on coffee. So the average American spends like $2,000 a year on coffee, which is crazy high. That does not mean that they can drop, $1,800 or even $2,000 on an espresso machine all at once. So knowing that there were so many people that loved our design language, loved the automation, we decided to build the Demi, which was a smaller form factor and lower price point unit. We achieved that by taking the milk frothing out of the equation because we also just found that there was a large portion of the population that just didn't need a perfectly frothed flat white or cortado. They don't mind just pouring milk into it. And that has just created a massive momentum shift in the business. It's been so interesting to see how people are kind of like falling into like, this is perfect for me if I live in like a high density city like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, you name it. Or, some people that are like, I just want all the bells and whistles, give me the fully loaded Range Rover. And I'm like, all right, I hear you. So it's created a very interesting, kind of demarcation of our customer base. And like full disclosure, early days, like from our investors and our team, there was a lot of consideration and concern. Like, is it going to cannibalize the TKO2? It's still relatively new. It's still gaining traction. Is it going to basically just eat a lot of the market that would have otherwise bought the O2 at a lower price point? It has not happened. That has not been the case. If anything, the O2 is selling faster now. And I think there's a sense of validation and credibility you get, especially in like complex hardware when you're not limited to a single hero SKU. They're like, okay, this is a real brand. They're launching multiple machines. They have like a track record in the space.
This topic brings me back to another conversation I had. I spoke with Dave Ali, who founded Allman Surfboards, and they introduced a sort of lower end entry model surfboard several years into their journey. And there was a lot of concern that it was going to cannibalize their entire business. And I asked him, what did you do, if anything, to sort of mitigate that risk? And he said, nothing. We just had to go for it because I knew it was existential for the business in order to grow and to survive and to be something that's sustained. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you had a similar approach or if you took any sort of measures to mitigate that risk of cannibalization.
I think in the product development process, because it does take a long time to eventually bring a physical product to market. And we can talk about it a separate time, but there's like these few like discrete like goosebump moments in the product development process, especially with like long lead hardware that I just like absolutely love. But you clearly make these decisions around, okay, like what is the feature set here? Why would somebody opt into the TKO2? And being cognizant of like, yeah, this could be cannibalizing. Like that is going to eat a proportion of the market share. The one thing I think is like, I don't mean to be irreverent towards or reductive, but I do think it's funny when people are like, I'll just do research and surveys and analysis to figure out exactly what the proportional split will be and have the value maximizing formula over like, you can do all of the monadic pricing surveys and conjoint analysis and market demand, for various categories, but I don't think you really know until you get the product out the door. I did know that obviously the few brands that are in our space have a diversity of products. I know that $2,000 is a high hurdle for most people to make the leap into, investing in a machine in their home. And I did look at all that data. I'm not saying you ignore it. Like we looked at, one of our biggest competitors, Revel, their entry category machine, one SKU on Amazon in July, 1 month, did $5.5 million. Their high-end unit did like 900,000. It's not bad. It's not bad for one SKU on one channel in 1 month, but it is a nonlinear relationship in market size when you kind of come into that sub $1,000 category. And the other metric that we paid a lot of attention to was word of mouth. We have over 1/3 of our orders come from word of mouth. So we run every month regular post-purchase surveys. We also do just like install-based surveys. The biggest challenge we had is people just didn't know we existed. And I was like, look, I do suspect if we end up on more countertops, we end up in more conversations, the probability that this is a rising tide lifts all boats scenario, which is that O2 might be great and their friend might not be able to afford it. They get a Demi. Their friend might have a Demi and they say, hey, this is really great. I just want like the best of the best. I'm going to get the O2 is really played out in reality or in action. Like that's more the behavior that we're seeing. And we know that there's this community-based kind of virality that we need to continue to feed, but we're super limited if I'm just trying to sell you kind of a one-off single super premium SKU.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting. I don't think we touched on the third hero product.
Yeah. So that's our kind of new 2-in-1. It's a milk frother, which was initially intended to just be kind of an attachment to the Demi, since we knew people were going to buy that and then may want to have an option for a standalone frother. But then we also released it with a matcha functionality, so a custom temperature setting and custom whisk for matcha. Just seeing the massive explosion in matcha as a category as a whole, and hearing from so many people that they love the tradition of like whisking it and making it, but frankly is like, that's what we're here for, is like, if the same with espresso as it is for matcha, like if you do the slow method and you take the time and you're weighing out every bean and every gram and you're spraying your beans with water to remove the static right before you grind them, that's beautiful. But we're trying to solve for that proportion of the society that loves that drink but needs it automated. And it was the same thing with matcha. We're like, wait, it is a relatively manual process. For those people that need it in a more like expedient or efficient manner, like we could also produce something that's custom built for them. And it's not even shipping yet. It's going to start shipping at the end of this month. We've already blown past our forecast for the whole year for that product.
Wow.
We thought it was going to be kind of like a mid 6-figure top line SKU and not putting any sort of meaningful, forecasts or projections on it, but it's clearly going to be a 7-figure top line in its first year.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think it'd be helpful too, and I might splice this and place it elsewhere in the conversation. I do think it'd be helpful to, just in your own words, to hear a description of the TKO2.
So the TKO2 is a connected super automatic bean to cup espresso machine. What does that actually mean? It brews anything from an espresso to a cappuccino, flat white latte, you name it, at the touch of a button and from fresh whole beans. You don't need to resort to any sort of single-use plastic or aluminum coffee pods. The idea there was, there are a lot of customers that are basically defaulting to the pod-based machines that frankly want, for either ecological reasons or health and wellness reasons, to really take all of those extra materials like plastic out of the equation. And really, ultimately, we just wanted to build the most beautiful, easy to use, highest functioning version of that type of machine.
Perfect.
Can I actually just tell you one other interesting fact about that?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, this blew my mind. Just blew my mind. After we shipped around 20,000 TKO2s, we did a survey at that time, and we were like, okay, like I want to learn a lot more from these customers. One stat, I mean, there were a lot of stats that shocked me. One of the stats that shocked me the most was 48% of our customers who bought a TKO2 were coming from pod-based machines. And of that 48%, half of them half of them were Keurig owners. It was split 50-50 between Keurig and espresso, which meant people were going from a $99 Keurig to a $2,000 espresso machine. And that honestly, it did surprise me. We thought our sequence of product roadmap and launches was going to be at the beginning. Let's go for the high end espressos, because a lot of people don't know this. You can find espressos for like 200, $250 or on sale for cheaper. But there's like from the $400 range up to like 900. You have these premium espressos. That's where we really thought we were going to start, was that subsegment of that category. And I thought that was fine, much like the RX bar story. I was like, okay, it's not a bad thing to really focus in on a niche and win in that category and help them, kind of handhold them to graduate to something that's higher quality, that they're proud to showcase on their countertop. And then you kind of grow out in concentric circles to grow the TAM once you've really, won with that space. But seeing half of those customers coming from pods and then half of that coming from Keurig completely blew me away.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think it just speaks to the fact that you were right. Your thesis to me is sort of validated with that data point. Clearly there was something they wanted that wasn't there, and you came in
Yeah.
and you filled that
Yeah.
void. So I'm wondering if, as a result, did you change your approach to marketing, let's say, or to sales and distribution? Like, what downstream effects did learning or did seeing that statistic have on the business and how you were operating, if at all?
First of all, it absolutely validated the product strategy that the Demi machine that we launched was a no-brainer, because it is a more natural entry point for those customers. So it was another, just, I would say, very critical salient example or critical data point in our decision-making calculus that we're clearly resonating with them. We're not going to, we have to have an honest talk with ourselves. We're not going to convert the entire population of 10 million Keurigs being sold each year. We're not going to graduate all of them to a TKO2. That's not realistic. But we can take the positioning where we're operating at the highest end of the category and kind of work our way down to those customers to give them more optionality or to reduce barriers to transact with us. So I think first and foremost was we wanted to double down on what was working with the TKO2, but also expand our offering and assortment. As for how we marketed the O2, absolutely. I mean, it was a huge part of our messaging that we doubled down on, but it was also one of those things that I think was most powerful when we actually just amplified the voice of our community. So we would create ads with people that actually left us real voicemails. We would, of course, do any sort of, typical kind of, not even necessarily influencer, because we actually had real customers that we reached out to, but having third parties kind of validate that story on our behalf. Because the challenge was, at face value, if I run an ad and says, hey, Keurig customers, this is a great option for you, the first reaction I'm going to get is vitriol. They're going to be like, how dare you try and sell me a $2,000 machine? That's disgusting. That's so expensive. But that person has never looked at the category. They haven't seen the $4,000 Jura, the $5,000 Miele. And that's understandable. It's not a big part of their lexicon. It's not a big part of the zeitgeist. They're not that well known. So we couldn't lean into it, but we did lean into, things like a waste calculator. And there's two forms of waste. There's environmental waste and there's also the economical waste of what they're doing, which is they're very perniciously trapping you into an ecosystem. Yeah, I'll give you the hardware for free, or it's not free, but virtually nothing. But I'm going to bank on the fact that you're not going to do the math on how much you're spending on the pods. And even just seeing like Nespresso pod prices, like I don't know how many people have actually clocked over the past 5 years how much the per pod or per capsule cost has gone up, because it's more than doubled. And that's, by the way, that's also why we launched the rental offering too. We were like, well, let's let people rent a machine, because even if it doesn't work for everyone, it makes the economics more aligned, because what you're spending per month on those pods actually kind of comes out to more or less the same. Whether or not you're comfortable with the fact that you're renting it, not owning it, it's still something relatively new to us that we're piloting and testing out. But it's been scaling really well. And I think it's because it makes the numbers more at parity.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the rental model at some point during this conversation, so let's just talk about it now.
Yeah, let's get into it.
I think the why is fairly straightforward, like why
Yeah.
launch a rental
Yeah.
offering?
Meet the customers where they're at. That's
Yeah,
why.
right. But I'm interested to hear if there've been any surprises in terms of maybe like who you're seeing rent your products and what the rate, let's call it the graduation rate to ownership looks like. Any surprises since kicking that off?
I would say there's one and a half surprises. There is one thing that we had a thesis on that kind of came to fruition, or at least it has. I would say it still needs to be fully validated, but it seems like we're seeing this anecdotally, and I would like to do a little bit more analysis empirically. But we have absolutely seen people that want to do the rental as a try before you buy, even though we have a 30-day risk-free trial. Even though we have that, it's just less dollars on your credit card or less dollars out of your pocket that makes them feel more comfortable and say, okay, I want to like do the rental, and then I might want to, just buy the machine. But I opt for that methodology, which I think is super interesting. I thought that might be the case. And now that we've actually seen that happen quite a number of times, it's like, okay, it's clearly clicking for a cohort of people, but that's not at all how we position it. Because again, you can buy the machine and you can still, within the 30-day trial, return it if you don't like it. But it's just a little, yeah, I mean, I'll say it bluntly, it's a little less scary than dropping $2,000 on something and not knowing the brand well or something like that, and wanting to go through the return refund process for what is an otherwise kind of pretty big piece of hardware that you have to coordinate how to ship back. The other surprise that I thought was really interesting, and it's something that we're evaluating internally how much we want to drive at or run hard at, is the growth of B2B. What became abundantly clear really quickly is renting a machine aligns much more organically with how offices, small offices, retail showrooms, like just a lot of commercial environments, how they think about paying for food and beverage. There's a lot of service contracts, whether you're working with ISS Guggenheimer, if you're Spotify, or if you're working with UNFI or whatever, like a lot of these food services, they set up contracts and there's a service related element and then the actual consumable related element. But just generally speaking, they're more accustomed to just paying on a monthly cadence. And for whatever reason, it's really resonating with the B2B side of the business, where a lot of these small offices, especially with like a return to office moment, are just using our machine as amenity and saying, hey, we got a new espresso machine for the team. But it's, even if it would be more economical to buy it outright, if you use it for a long enough period of time, it just might make more sense with offices. Also, people change offices, they move, they might, not want to make that big of an investment, but they're totally fine on a monthly cadence to pay for the rental. That's been incredibly successful. And it's actually something that I want to explore a little bit
Mm.
more as a business on how we can get more creative with the offering. Because right now, there is the machine, there is the subscription, but we've been having some ideation like what would a white glove service look like alongside that if we wanted to kind of crawl, walk, run our way into more of the commercial side of coffee.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what commercial environments you're finding the most success in, and if you're seeing any patterns around, I guess, difficulty with too much use in a commercial environment and maintenance. It's one thing to maintain a product that you've invested in at home, but I feel like if you're in a shared space, that dynamic looks a little bit different.
Yeah, there's nothing funnier when I tell people, please don't buy our machine. Like they're like, no, I want to get your machine. I'm like, no, 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 yeah, but seriously, please don't do that. Like, it's because if it is a bad experience for them, if it's not designed for a given use case, they're having a bad experience. We are also going to get hit with costs because we warranty things. So they're going to be like, hey, I'm using it in this cafe and I'm brewing 200 shots a day. It's not designed for that. We have a big enough market and we know where we really slot in. We don't need to chase or force sales into directions that don't actually fit what the product use case is. And I'm a big believer in the quote that, reputation is earned in drops and lost in buckets. Like, if you piss people off, they're going to go online. We've had it happen. We've had crazy force majeure things happen to the business, acts of God that disrupted our operational infrastructure. It was a very acute period of time, but we got hit hard with it and ended up online. We had to earn our reputation back after that. And so I really don't want to force, ourselves into scenarios where it's a square peg round hole kind of sale. But, the funny thing is like with the stats that we can see, like we have a leaderboard of, who's brewed the most on their machine. And there's one person that's so far and beyond everyone else. And of course, we looked it up and it was like, oh, it's a cafe in New Jersey. And this person even has our machine in their photos in the cafe. And we're like, oh, like she's just running through this machine, which is, again, it happens all the time. We don't specialize in cafes, at least not now, not today, but there are a lot of B2B environments where we show up. And like I said, it can be like retail showrooms, it can be small offices. We have boutique hotels reaching out all the time now, especially with the Demi. It's actually a really nice in suite or in room amenity. It's actually a pretty luxurious offering. So a lot of people want to promote that. So a lot of the hospitality space. We've had some really interesting things. I'm not going to say who, but we had an NFL team reach out that wanted to buy 450 of them. And we're like, okay, this is interesting. We asked, of course, like why? And they're like, yeah, for staff, team, suites in the stadium. And I was like, that's pretty cool. There's coffee shows up everywhere. I've always wanted to, have our machines really kind of honestly take over like the nightlife bar back. Like when you're in Europe and you go out, every bar has an espresso machine. It's nice if you just want a coffee. It doesn't have to even be espresso martini. If you just want an espresso shot late night, just to have, it's just a nice thing that it's relatively easy. I'm like, we could make this so easy because every time I go somewhere and they say they have espresso martinis and they're pouring cold brew, which is fine, could taste fine. I know that it's a concession they're making. Or alternatively, they have a manual machine. And I always ask the staff, I'm like, how do you like having that there? They're like, I absolutely hate it. This thing always has problems. And God forbid I have a table of 6 people that all want an espresso martini. I'm stuck back there for 30 minutes pulling shots. And I'm like, it just makes sense
Yeah.
for us to slot it. Anyways, I can talk all day about this, but there's so many B2B environments that we've seen ourselves play into. We have not yet actively built a kind of an outbound strategy to really supercharge it. It's all inbound.
The bar setting just feels like a perfect fit, like zero friction.
At this point, every time I'm out with someone, they're like, Sahan's going to ask them what espresso machine they have or what coffee machine they have. And I'm like, yep. Half the time they're like, hey, we're having problems with our espresso machine. Can you come help us? And I'm like back there. My friends are taking photos of me repairing some commercial machine. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'm used to it. But yeah, I want to see that happen. As far as I know, there isn't one good party to go to really unlock that. Otherwise, it's just one-off relationship building with people who own restaurants and seeing if they're interested in getting a machine, which we do and it happens, but it doesn't feel very scalable. It feels very like old economy, slow kind of sales cycle approach.
At some point, you decide to launch a coffee line. And we talked a little bit about the sort of, call it predatory business model around locking somebody into your pod, for example.
Yeah.
This is not that, but you still decided to launch this line. So I'm interested to hear about what the rationale was and how you're seeing that show up in the numbers. I guess, like what % of your customers are subscribing to your coffee as well? And I'm
Yeah.
also, this is like 5 questions now, but I am really interested to hear a little bit about your decision to pretty significantly discount the hardware upon signing up for the coffee subscription at checkout. Yeah, just walk me through coffee as a
there's
whole.
there's so many things to cover. Okay, let me see if I can exercise brevity or at least turn my verbosity setting on low here. Okay, so first things first, we're graduating a lot of people away from pods. A lot of them don't know what to get. And we know they're naturally going to likely default to the lowest price, highest rating option on Amazon, which is fine. But a lot of those are bad coffee. So if we are helping guide them in the journey of getting good coffee and ideally at a good value for money, and we kind of know what their taste profiles are. It's a far better scenario. It's a far better user experience. Otherwise, it can be trash in, trash out. And they might blame our machine. They be like, hey, this is garbage, but it also does matter what kind of coffee you're using. Second, we have a lot of relationship with coffee roasters. I think it's a beautiful thing for us to be able to advocate for them. We have our own coffee line. We have a marketplace of other coffees. We sell a lot of other people's coffee. We, frankly, I just see it as a great opportunity to build a relationship and then be more deeply involved with the broader coffee community. Like if you know Sight Glass Coffee in San Francisco, great. You're already aware of them. You can buy their coffee from us or you can buy from them directly. You might know them. You might not know Parlor Coffee based out of the Navy Yard in Brooklyn. Like, there's so many opportunities for us to advocate for a lot of these amazing small businesses or small, medium-sized businesses. And also, frankly, discover new coffees ourselves that we want our customers to try. We built the TK monthly picks so you can have a rotational program, stuff like that. So that's number two. I do think it's, important to take into consideration that having an ongoing relationship with a customer is valuable. Otherwise, you look at everything after you sell them the machine as an expense and you just start trying to optimize the expense. If I have an ongoing relationship with you, I am highly motivated to make sure you continue to feel happy. I'm always motivated because I want to have a good reputation because that will help me sell more machines. But I don't want to start viewing everything as an expense. I think once you start to develop a real lifetime value with that customer, you can really look at each engagement very differently. And I think it'll at least affords you as a business, especially how hard it is as an early stage business where you don't have nearly the capital of your competitors to just do more and more for customers because you at least have that ongoing relationship. And it's also very honest. We have to earn our keep every day. You can switch to any beans you want. You can go to a cheaper option. You can go to some super expensive option that maybe we don't carry. So we have to earn it every time you choose to buy, a coffee from us or anything from us, really. So like that to me is a much more honest system than what we see with the pod-based machines, where even when Nespresso's patent wore out on the small capsule, they've changed to the Vertuo line and they're presenting it as a new USP. But in reality, it was an IP strategy. They put a new patent on the semicircle pod so that they can lock you back into the ecosystem. And it's like, you can choose any coffees you want, but I know that if you use good coffees, you're gonna have a better experience. I can help you with that. I can also help you build a relationship with these roasters, like I said, where you can actually upload their recipe for an espresso profile onto your machine. So you have their recommended settings, which also then thereby builds a deeper connection with the coffee community. And again, like it's just a way healthier relationship when I don't look at everything after I sold a machine as, okay, every touch point with you is now an expense to me and I need to try and optimize for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's grown a lot. It's grown a lot. So it's now we've passed 10,000 subscriptions as a business. We've really started to focus on it about 2 years ago, but it's been scaling really quickly. We still need to do a lot more. We're learning a lot. I always told the team right now, the name of the game is not profiting. We're not really making any money off that coffee, but the name of the game is have an ongoing relationship with customers, have an ongoing and deeper relationship with the broader coffee community and have more touch points with them. Like we need to learn about how to optimize this for the future so that we show up as a surprise and delight, not a paper cut. I don't want to become Blue Apron. I don't want, it's like you just shoving more frozen meal kits into your freezer. I think we have a unique opportunity where we are the delivery system. If we're also giving them the consumable, let's actually do something that adapts to people's consumption preferences and behavior, not force your consumption preferences and behavior to adapt to our business model, because I don't think the latter works.
Yeah. That is an excellent answer and an excellent set of lessons. Are there any data points during the 30-day trial that tell you somebody is extremely likely to retain? For example, something like if somebody brews X number of drinks in their first 5 days, they have a much higher propensity to retain to the product, something like that.
I'm going to be really honest with you. I love the question. I don't have a concrete answer for you right now. And that's actually one of the things we've been working on with our engineering team. We've been collecting a lot of information and we've been really focusing on near term discernible impacts and improvements for our heaviest users and biggest advocates. There's so much more work we need to do as far as how to think through the data that we see and what it means for the entire user journey. And so there's that period you're talking about, which is the trial period moments. But there's this entire journey where, for example, we could actually potentially find out, hey, you doing these brews with these alerts that popped up and then the dismisses that you're doing, like the probability of an issue arising in this type of issue is very high. Like, let's reach out to them proactively and help them out. Like the predictive maintenance, remote troubleshooting, there's so many ways for us to actually utilize this information. I wish I had a very concrete answer for you on that one. What I do know is we've made sure how we think about our data architecture, we can start to utilize it in that manner. And the one thing I love that our CTO always says, it's like the first job is learning how to ask the right questions. And you need to build the models so that it actually teaches you how to ask the right questions, that thereby then deliver you a recommendation of what to change or how to act with the customer. We're still at the point of like, let's make sure we're asking the right questions that we're trying to then discern what the recommendation would be to enhance the overall user experience.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. What other brands do you draw inspiration from?
Oh my God. That's a long list.
Top two or three?
Well, I'll have to say it's not going to be what you would intuitively think, but as the son of two architects, Aesop, and I even know, I say that knowing that their name is actually pronounced Aesop, but a company that designs each store, architects and designs each store, considering the locale, the organic nature, natural elements, if there are any, like the Aesop in Berlin versus New York versus Brooklyn's, Williamsburg location versus like the tobacco leaves that they used in the Virginia or Georgetown location, like that level of intentionality and obsession of detail, I just think is absolutely goals in terms of how I want to think about, how we build our brand, how we design our products, how we design the user experience. That level of obsession to me it's what I revere very heavily. I think nothing in terms of taking a bold stance on a massive category in, smartphones and headphones. I think they definitely are trying to do something very different. And I think it's a really hard battle, but I love the way that they position themselves. I love how the founder is really honest, how he talks about how they get things wrong. He's like, yeah, that you're right. He walks through every review and he's like, yeah, this thing wasn't great. I think innovation is a very messy process. And I don't think people should overlook that if they're starting something new. Like it is very messy. What is the quote? Like confidence is not thinking you're infallible. It's knowing you're not and holding yourself in high regard. It's like chin up, like, okay, like we got to get better at this. Let's do it. Like it's that forward momentum mentality. And I think that ownership mindset of like, yeah, we didn't nail that one is definitely something that I look up to very heavily. As far as like inspiration on the industrial design, I really like Bang& Olufsen, specifically the A9 speaker. I always remember my first meeting with Ammunition Group that we worked with to design our products. And they asked me, do you want to integrate seamlessly into the space or do you want to define this space? And I always liked how the Bang& Olufsen A9 looked like a piece of furniture in the room as opposed to looking like a big audiophile sound system. And as much as I love high quality speakers, I just thought it was a really, really cool, quiet stance and this quiet confidence in the product design that I pulled inspiration from. So maybe that's very specific to an actual model, but that was one of the examples of a brand that I thought just was incredibly inspirational and frankly, very definitive in a stance that they took in specifically the industrial design side. I mean, the wooden legs, if you got the nice mahogany color, like incredible.
That is my favorite response to this question from any guest I've had on the show so far.
Can I ask why?
Yeah, not only because those are excellent brands, but because I can actually see a through line to what you're building, the way in which you're building this product, the product itself, the way in which you're speaking about what you're building. Like it's really clear to me that those are actual inspirations, not to diminish anybody else's answer, but that's the most clear inspiration that I've been able to see in that response thus far.
Yeah. And I mean, those brands make me feel something. And that is the stuff that we talk about a lot. Like, I love seeing when people really take a really strong POV. And I know it's important as you grow a company, you grow a team, it's like strong opinions held lightly. But I love when people have a POV. It's why I also don't mind when people disagree with me because I'm like, you're standing for something. Like, let's talk about it. I may not agree with you, but I want to hear what you care about. We have, we have a rule in our company, no autopilot. Like you shouldn't join a startup if you want to be on autopilot. You just go work at IBM. But I love when people feel strongly about something. It's also why I love designers. They feel so much.
Mhm.
Can I tell you one last anecdote? I don't even know if you want to
Absolutely.
include this, but I'm just going to tell it to you.
Please do.
So we worked with ammunition for a long time. I didn't know their pedigree as well as I know it now, kind of knowing their inner workings. I just thought they were great. I had actually, the irony of the working with them for our entire product lineup was I had actually decided on a different industrial designer, and we had just got introduced to them at the 11th hour. And I just knew on the first call that I wanted to work with them. On that first call, Matt, one of their partners, told me, he said, Sahand, there's two types of founders. Every time I work with a company, there's two types of founders. There's the founder that's overly rigid, and then there's the founder that's overly amenable. And I don't remember why he told me that. He just told me that when we started. And then if you fast forward like 2, 3 years, they had me kind of come out to San Francisco to sit down with them for this panel talk. And I don't know why, but I just made a judgment call, even though I was the one being interviewed. I just made a judgment call. I was like, I'm going to ask you a question. You told me when we started 3 years ago that there's two types of founders, the overly amenable and the overly rigid. Which one am I? And he pauses, and I can see him looking up that he's actually thinking about this live. And he goes, I think you're reasonably unreasonable. And I was like, I love that explanation. Like that. He was like, the team likes you because you're crazy. And, there have been little design decisions that I've literally been like arguing with their leadership team about. And I'm like, who am I? They are the most impressive resume, designers in the country, but I just really believed in it. And I was like, I'll hear you out, but I'm going to have an opinion. So I guess I'm reasonably unreasonable. And maybe that translates to how I pull inspiration from other brands.
I love that answer. And I think it just goes to show the conviction you have and the clear vision you have for what it is you're trying to build. What have you changed your mind about since starting Terra Cafe?
I think I've at times grappled with and struggled with the notion of perfect is the enemy of good and perfect is the enemy of done. And I wonder if sometimes that kind of almost maniacal or manic behavior of being so obsessive and like needing it to be perfect is really where like the magic happens, and how you go that extra mile or extra yard or extra inch that the other people are not willing to go, but it makes all the difference. But I think had to very much learn how to operate within boundary constraints. I mean, at the end of the day, I have to be a realist and a pragmatist, and you know, I can't just have this dogmatic approach. It's not me going into a back room, coming out with an idea on a sketch pad and being like, build it. Like that's not, it kind of comes full circle to the first thing I said. It was like, there's been hundreds, if not like thousands of people that have touched our product. And I know that there are real limitations with that. And I know there are a lot of things that we've had to make concessions on that in the past, I think I would have really struggled with. And I think understanding that, it is a journey, it is a marathon, and trying to be better about, offering up those concessions to actually, in many ways, move faster and make better things, because you can just have faster cycle times on things. You get it out and you learn and you change and you improve. I think has been a personal learning lesson for me, and something that, has evolved my thinking over the past like 7 years that I've been building this.
I think we have time for one more question. Where do you see Terra Cafe 3 to 5 years out?
I mean, we have been really laser focused on, product development and expanding the assortment. We have launched a lot. We've launched 8 products in the last year and a half. Some of them more peripheral products, but still like all of them designed in house. And we have one more hero product coming out. It's actually the first place I'm saying this out loud, but we have one more hero product coming out that we're planning to announce in the first half of 2027. But how that then translates over the next 3 to 5 years is coffee shows up everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean, whether that's seasonally, temporally, geographically, we are trying to meet the customers where they're at. And frankly, we're trying to get our brand out there more. We are still very nascent. We are still very much an emerging brand. So from, channel diversification, market expansion, I really want to see Terra Cafe go from being this emerging brand to becoming a definitive one. And I think we have a really good product assortment. And just for the record, nothing we have in market right now is being sunset. So everything we're talking about is, incremental, but it is really one of those things where I think we have a really strong positioning right now from a brand and product level that the next 3 to 5 years is gas pedal to get the word out and get as many people experiencing our products as possible.
I cannot wait to see how it all unfolds. Sahand, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. I learned a ton. If you want to share with listeners where they can find Terra Kaffe, please feel free to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. You can find us on our website, terrakaffe.com. On Instagram is probably our biggest followings. It's just at Terra Kaffe, TerraKaffe. And yeah, we have our office. We are very open door. Our office is in Flatiron on 25th Street. If you ever want to stop by, we welcome you for a cup of coffee.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
All right, let's debrief. I think one of the things I appreciate most about Sahand is his conviction. You can hear it in the way he talks about product design, customer experience, and even the smallest details of how a machine fits into someone's kitchen or morning routine. He has such a clear point of view, but it's not detached from reality. It's constantly being shaped by manufacturing constraints, customer feedback, machine data, and the economics of actually getting a physical product into the world. That's what stands out most to me in today's conversation. Sahand's clearly building from taste and instinct, but he's also willing and eager to take pushback from the real world, through the factory, through the consumer, through the data they're collecting, and through the market broadly. I think the broader lesson here is that great consumer product companies are not built on taste alone, nor are they built on data alone. They come from having a very clear point of view, but also the discipline to let customers and constraints and economics shape how that point of view actually shows up in the product. Again, I learned so much during my conversation with Sahand, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you haven't already, make sure to follow and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.